Hello, listeners. This is Kat, and welcome back to Put Your Hands Up Podfic. This will be the continuation of All For You. This will be Part 7, Day 12. Aoi failed to bully Hisashi into sleeping that night, but at least one of the other nurses, Shinso, he thought, provided him with coffee. Anda brought him another cup in the morning, along with a delivered package of food. "This was sent for you," Anda said cheerfully, handing him the package. Hisashi stared at the package warily. He hadn't ordered food. He didn't remember ordering food. Did he forget? He thought he was handling the sleeplessness better this time, but... Oh, there was a note on top. He didn't order food. He hadn't forgotten that, so he was handling the sleeplessness better. He took it slowly. "Thank you, Anda." "No problem. You still can't eat it in here, I'm afraid, so when you're ready, do you think you could take it to the cafeteria or out in the hall?" Anda said. "Yes, of course," Hisashi said absent-mindedly. He would never eat food in here if it posed any threat to Izuku's health, much less food from a mysterious source. Even if it did say it was from Nezu on the outside of the note, taking things at face value was something only fools did. "Thank you, Midoriya-san. Oh, and also, the Bakugos wanted me to let you know they were coming," Anda said. "Thank you," Hisashi said, and Anda closed the door quietly behind her. Hisashi glared at the package. He turned on an infrared quirk and an X-ray quirk, but he saw nothing other than a warm blob, which could easily be food. The food could be poisoned, though. Hisashi pulled off the note slowly, ready to punt the package away if it showed any sign of exploding or anything of the sort. The sound of the tape pulling off made him flinch. The package did not explode. Hisashi grumbled under his breath about losing his touch. He set the package down on a table near the couch, far away from Izuku, who was sleeping peacefully, and opened the note. The letter swam a bit, but with a little squinting he could read fine. He didn't need the sight quirk this time. "Hello. I hope this care package finds you and Izuku well. New parents are well known for being overworked and tired, so I hope that you find this dish rejuvenating. You may also consider it a thanks for your initial information and a good faith initiation to the negotiations of your retirement." Hisashi snorted. Retirement. That was one way to put being caught like this. "I plan to visit in the next few days. See you soon. Nezu." Hisashi raised a brow at the note. A good faith initiation was nice and all, but he was very aware that it would be easiest for the heroes to simply kill him, give Izuku to whomever they saw fit, perhaps even leaving him to the claws of the HPSC, and be on their merry way. Nezu was clever enough to know that, and to know that Hisashi would know that, so truly he had to wonder why the chimera would be so obvious. Perhaps because Nezu knew that he would think this was an attempt on his life, and that Hisashi would wonder why he was being obvious, in the expectation that he would wrap around to assuming the food was harmless. He set aside the note with a sigh. He was far too tired for these mind games, regardless of whether Nezu would ask about the food next time he came, and there would be a next time. It was safest to just ignore the offering. Before he could sit down by Izuku again, there was a knock. "Hisashi, can we come in?" Masaru's soft voice floated through the door. Hisashi huffed, a small smile making its way to his face. After the last meeting he'd had with Mitsuki, he hadn't really expected to see them again unless something went wrong and Izuku needed to go to their care. Then again, the Bakugos had always been very involved in Inko's life. Even though she was no longer here, he supposed they were still invested, if only in her son's well-being. That was fine. He understood. Hisashi walked over and opened the door. Masaru's fist hung in the air, and he blinked stupidly. Mitsuki stood behind him, talking to a nurse. "Hello, Masaru," Hisashi said. "Here to see Izuku?" "Oh, well, yes," Masaru said, pushing his glasses up. "But we're here to see you too." Now it was Hisashi's turn to blink stupidly. Masaru smiled. "I'm glad to see you looking—" Masaru tilted his head, his eyes taking on an analytical gleam. "Well, not good, but at least not as terrible as before." Hisashi barked a laugh. He hadn't expected that from the soft-spoken man. "Thank you, Masaru. Your care is appreciated," Hisashi said as he stepped aside to let the couple in. Masaru smiled and nodded, then made a beeline for the incubator. "Hello, Izuku," Masaru whispered in sing-song. "You had us all so worried, but look at you now. You look so much better." Mitsuki walked in after, pushing him away from the door and toward her husband. "Go talk to Masaru. He's been worried sick." Hisashi held up his hands in surrender and made his way back to Izuku. He was loath to leave his son's side anyway, so he hardly needed encouragement to go back. Hisashi sidled up to Masaru and joined him in looking down at Izuku. His son was buried in wires, tubes, and sensors. He could barely be seen amongst them. His chest rose and fell in time with the ventilator. He had gained some weight since his birth, but he still looked nothing like a normal newborn. "How did the surgery go?" Masaru asked softly. "He handled it well," Hisashi replied just as quietly. "They were only able to do a patch job. He will need surgery again before his first birthday." "But he'll reach his first birthday?" Masaru asked. Hisashi smiled, laying a hand on the incubator as pride swelled in his chest. "He should, as long as it's smooth sailing from here," Hisashi said. "Thank goodness," Masaru breathed. "Thank goodness." Hisashi nodded, easily able to understand Masaru's relief. He had quickly learned to understand Inko's hatred of rough tissues after Izuku had come back. "Hisashi," Masaru started, pointing to the recliner hesitantly. "Do you mind if I sit here for a bit? I mean, you probably need a break, right?" Masaru said with a hesitant laugh. "Mitsuki said she had to kick you out just to eat last time." "Ah," Hisashi said, looking aside. "Yes, well, that is true. But I don't really mind staying with you, and—" Hisashi looked around. Mitsuki was gone. So was the food package. His stomach dropped. Mitsuki was Inko's best friend. Mitsuki was pregnant, and that food might be poisoned. "On second thought," Hisashi said, looking back over at Masaru with a smile that hid his inner anxiety, "I could probably stand some food." Masaru smiled back and sat down. "Yes, of course. Go eat. I'll keep an eye on him. Masaru said, looking at Izuku. "Want to process that he's okay." "Of course," Hisashi said as he made his way out. He had needed to do the same thing after Izuku had come back, not that he would admit it to anyone but himself and the security camera in the corner, and the nurses that had come to check on Izuku. "I'll be back soon," Hisashi said. Masaru shooed him out with a gentle but firm, "Go eat." Hisashi looked back at Izuku again before forcing himself out of the room. The door clicked quietly behind him, but it felt so much louder. Hisashi sucked in a deep breath and forced his fingers to let go of the door handle. He had a responsibility to Inko's memory, to the people she had chosen to care about, to the people who hated him. He needed to find Mitsuki. He still turned on an enhanced hearing quirk and made sure he could hear Masaru and Izuku before he left to look for her. Thankfully, a few questions to the nurses and a little wandering later, he found her on a bench in a hallway outside the NICU. She sat with a box balanced on her belly, cheerfully munching on her stolen food. Hisashi marched forward and went to snatch it out of her hands. Mitsuki dodged his grab, moving the food out of his reach with a chipmunk-cheeked snarl. He could force it out of her grip, but he was already on thin ice with her and didn't want to take the chances. Hisashi stood up straight, glaring down at her. "Mitsuki, why are you eating that?" he demanded, his voice low and soft. Mitsuki huffed, leveling her own glare at him. "Because it's fancy-ass food. You weren't eating it, and I'm hungry." "It could be poisoned," Hisashi hissed. "I'm not dead yet," Mitsuki said spitefully, and took another bite while looking him straight in the eyes. "Mitsuki!" Hisashi snapped, looming over her. Mitsuki took another bite, making an obnoxious sound at the same time. He sighed heavily, one hand pinching the bridge of his nose. Hisashi held out a hand and said, "Give me some of that." "Hell no," Mitsuki said, her eyes narrowing. "My food now." "I want to check if it's poisoned," Hisashi said. "How the hell are you going to do that, huh?" Mitsuki challenged. "I'll use a quirk for it," Hisashi said tiredly. "Your quirk is fire breath—" Shit. He had told the staff the truth of his quirk shortly after his identity was revealed in what he was sure was the most interesting medical history interview they've had to date. But he had forgotten that was one part of the truth Mitsuki did not know yet. Too late now. "I'll use a different one." Mitsuki blinked. "Different quirk?" Hisashi said nothing. He made a grabbing motion with his hand. Mitsuki huffed, still guarding her stolen goods. "If it's so easy for you, why didn't you do that the first time?" "Because I am tired and did not want to," Hisashi snapped. "Baby," Mitsuki said, smirking. Her guard dropped. Hisashi let out another sigh, turned on a speed quirk, and stole the shrimp tempura out of her chopsticks. "Hey!" He turned on a poison-detecting quirk and took a bite. "It's clean," Hisashi huffed, stuffing the rest in his mouth. It was very good. And as much as he was loath to admit it, he was hungry. Mitsuki snorted. "I could have told you that." She waved a piece of gyoza in his face, seemingly making it her purpose in life to be annoying. No, you couldn't have, Hizashi said, glaring. Mitsuki gave him a shit-eating grin. Hizashi grabbed her arm, snatched the gyoza, and ate it. That didn't seem so hard, Mitsuki said teasingly. Hizashi grumbled. He'd finished what he came here for. He'd made sure Mitsuki was safe. He should just leave, go back to Izuku and let her finish her meal, but... He looked over at his stolen food sullenly. The tempura was delicious, the gyoza too. He hoped his stomach wasn't going to give him away like last time. He was not going to beg for his own damn food back. Mitsuki scooched over and pulled another set of chopsticks out of her purse. Hizashi looked at her warily. Come on, sit, she said, patting the bench seat next to her. Why do you have chopsticks in your purse? Hizashi asked. Masaru always drops his, Mitsuki said. What are you waiting for? Food's only going to get cold, you know. I'm fine, Hizashi said, pointedly ignoring the empty hole in his stomach. Bullshit. I know you're hungry, Mitsuki said. I can eat in the cafeteria again, Hizashi pointed out, not that he was going to. Mitsuki gave him a look. Like you really want to be that far from your kid if you can avoid it. Hizashi winced. She was right. Come on, eat before I take all the shrimp tempura. Hizashi snatched the chopsticks and sat next to her, pointedly stealing some of the shrimp. So, different quirks. Spill, old man. Hizashi sighed. He knew being honest about his quirk would result in this, but he really didn't want to deal with it right now. Later, Mitsuki. Hizashi sighed tiredly. Later means never with you, Hizashi, Mitsuki retorted. Tell me. Why? Hizashi said with a microscopic hint of a whine. Mitsuki snorted again. What? Can't a woman ask her dead best friend's villain husband what his real quirk is? Mitsuki. Inko may not have wanted the details, but I do, Mitsuki said, pointing her chopsticks at Hizashi's face threateningly. Hizashi swallowed and took some rice. The details aren't pleasant dinner conversation. Mitsuki rolled her eyes. You think I don't know that? Hizashi stared at her out of the corner of his eye. Mitsuki sighed. Look, I don't need all the nitty-gritty gory details, but I do need to know more. Not leaving Inko's baby with just anyone. Her voice cracked as she spoke. Neither of them acknowledged it. I had your seal of approval before, Hizashi pointed out. Mitsuki bonked him on the head with a fist. Ow, Hizashi grumbled, rubbing his head. What was that for? For being an idiot, Mitsuki shouted. Hizashi flinched. He'd forgotten how loud she could be. For some ancient supervillain, you can be really stupid. You know that, Hizashi? Mitsuki said. I haven't slept in 4 days, Hizashi protested. Then sleep, Mitsuki roared. Hizashi covered his ears. Then no one will be watching him. You're in a fucking hospital. Can you be a little quieter? Hizashi asked, exasperated. His head was starting to pound. Mitsuki threw her head back and groaned. What, you turned on some owl quirk so you can listen to Izuku from out here or some shit? Hizashi said nothing. Mitsuki hit him on the head again. Merciless woman. As I was saying, I had your approval before, Hizashi said, changing the subject before he could be ridiculed any more. Mitsuki glared at him. Yeah, before I found out what your real job was. Come on, Mitsuki said, taking another bite of the now cold food and wincing. You at least owe me what your actual fucking quirk is. Hizashi let out a heavy sigh and set down his chopsticks. He looked around, checking the hallways for a passerby and the corners for cameras. My quirk is called All for One. I can give and take quirks. Happy now? Mitsuki's eyebrows skyrocketed. I thought that shit was just urban legend. No, it was me, Hizashi admitted. Huh, Mitsuki said, setting her own chopsticks down and staring into the distance. The food sat between, cold and unfinished. A nervousness was building in Hizashi's stomach. He resisted the urge to fidget. Mitsuki would not abandon his son because of his own quirk. She would not. She was too stubborn to do that, he was certain. Right? Did you seek out Inko as a quirk marriage-type deal? Mitsuki asked, her voice level and neutral. So your kid could take quirks from a distance? Mitsuki, Hizashi started slowly. I was not the one that made advances. Our relationship was not some grand plan of mine. It was not planned at all. It was an impulse decision. He looked away, staring in the direction of where Izuku lay. He could hear the beep of Izuku's monitors, and Masaru humming gently to him amongst the hustle and bustle of the staff and other parents and patients. Many of my other projects were in the long game, and I was bored, he said, his voice soft. I had never thought of having a relationship. I had never had one before, nor had I ever wanted one. It would have been a distraction and a liability to my work, but at the time, I was in need of something to do, so when Inko asked, I said yes. I was not planning on getting attached, but I did. He could feel Mitsuki's eyes on him. It was not a kind feeling. Besides, Hizashi said, looking back over at her, All for One is a first-generation meta ability. There's a high likelihood that Izuku won't even have a quirk. Hizashi looked down at his hands and mumbled. He's had a bad draw from my genetics already, so I wouldn't be surprised. I still don't trust you. You trust me enough to eat my food, Hizashi pointed out. Yeah, 'cause I trust the fucking principle of UA. If you had made me food right now, or even given me a drink, I would have thrown it in the garbage, Mitsuki said sharply. Hizashi sighed. He couldn't say her comment was unwarranted or unfounded, but it was unpleasant to hear that someone he trusted with Izuku's life didn't trust him enough to take a cup of coffee from his hand. Don't think you can pout your way back into my good graces, Hizashi. You lied to Inko about a lot of really big, really important shit. And because you were selfish, playing house with my best friend, you're putting her son in the line of fire, Mitsuki said. I never meant for it to be this way, Mitsuki, Hizashi said softly. Yeah, 'cause you never meant to get caught, Mitsuki snapped back. That means jack shit to me, Hizashi. Hizashi said nothing, looking away. Hey, look at me, Mitsuki said. Hizashi looked over. Mitsuki's eyes were rock hard. I'm not giving you my approval back easy. You've got to prove to me that you were worth what Inko gave you. Hizashi set his jaw and nodded. Yes, ma'am. Mitsuki huffed and picked up her chopsticks and the food again, poking at what was left half-heartedly. You got any stupid quirks in there? Or anything that would warm this stuff back up? Yes, I can, Hizashi said as he took the food and turned on a weak fire quirk, warming it with radiant heat from his palm. They sat in silence, waiting for the quirk to work like a particularly old dying microwave. I have one that allows you to shoot a laser from your belly button, he said after a while. Mitsuki snorted. Why would you want that? I didn't, Hizashi said dryly. Mitsuki laughed. Hizashi smiled. He set the food down between them again once it had gotten warm enough to be palatable, and they finished it off. Hizashi folded the box up so he could dispose of it in a nearby trash can when they eventually went back to the NICU. Hey, Mitsuki said slowly. Can you go get Masaru for me? Hizashi pouted. Why? Do you dislike my company so? And here I thought we were starting to make up. Shut up, you, Mitsuki said with a tight smile, bonking him on the head again. Hizashi grumbled. No, I think my contraction started, Mitsuki said. Hizashi stared. He felt all the blood drain out of his face. Contractions, screaming, crying, blood. Then she was gone. Hizashi? Hizashi scrambled off the bench in a graceless jumble of limbs and ran to the NICU, yelling for help. Ring, 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 ring. Hello, this is Inko Midoriya. I'm sorry I missed your call. Please leave a message and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Beep. Mitsuki has gone into labor. I hope it goes well. I miss you, love. Call ended. All right, listeners. This concludes day 12 of All For You. I hope you all are still enjoying this fic. Let me know your thoughts and reactions to everything so far. Day 13 will be next, and as always, thank you so much for listening.